This is something where the Biden-Harris administration has failed those basic voters, the low and middle income families who are struggling the most.
This week on the Hill, Majority Leader Steve Scalise was on this week, and he focused on the actual issues that are going to matter most to voters this November. Here, take a look.
What are the top three issues that you would say that Republican-leaning voters are focused on and concerned about?
Yeah, as we get closer to November, those top three issues, Tony, are crystallizing everywhere you go. And number one, far and away, is the border. People want to get this border secured. It's madness what's going on at the border. And that comes up no matter what part of the country you're in. The number two issue clearly is inflation, the cost of things. And, wherever part of the country you go into, they're complaining about grocery prices. They're complaining about gas prices and energy prices, just cooling their home in the summer. I mean, these are problems that were created by the Biden and Harris administration. Everybody knows that. And so, when you talk to families who are, whether they're wealthy or poor, it's the same issues, Tony. And, this is where Kamala Harris is going to have a real problem. She was with Joe Biden, helping be the architect. Look, she was the deciding vote for the Inflation Reduction Act. She can't run away from these things. The policies that created the inflation, that when you go to the grocery store, you're paying 30% more than when Biden took office. That was Kamala Harris who helped cast that deciding vote. When she brags that she wants to ban fracking, I don't know, maybe now when she goes to Pennsylvania, she might try to change her position on that too. But she's not going to be able to get away with that because she's on video saying that she wants to ban fracking, and it's raising the cost of energy. It's empowering Putin. Why would you give billions more to Putin and to Iran, the Ayatollahs there, to be able to fund their war machines? And then she boycotts Netanyahu's speech. This is something where the Biden-Harris administration has failed those basic voters, the low and middle income families who are struggling the most.
Yep. This week on the Hill, if you didn't see the whole episode, please catch the entirety of it. So, Elaine, we'll start with you. That's a litany of policies right now that I think if you go back to the Republican National Convention, they were emphasizing it as well. This, I think, plays into a winning hand for the Republicans. What do you think?
Look, I think Republicans up and down the ballot can argue on very strong issues. President Trump himself can argue a very strong record. He's not going to be talking about what he's going to do if he wins the presidency. He can talk about what he did as president and how well Americans did under his administration. What Americans should also remember is that no matter who's at the top of the ticket, the problem is the Democratic failed policies that has resulted in historic inflation and hurt our small businesses, everyday ordinary Americans. We just had a poll come out of our small business owners. We do a national poll of small business owners, and 2/3 of them say that the economic situation could actually force them to close. But they've also identified the primary issues that are so important to them in this election. 60% of them say that inflation and the economy are the most important issues for them going into this election.
Yeah, and Akash, as you saw from Leader Scalise, he actually has obviously two agendas here. He wants to help the presidential ticket, but he'd like to grow his majority. And these issues help in his districts because these are kitchen table issues that all of these Americans are caring about, regardless of some of the bigger national things.
That's exactly right, Larry. As you know, we've been all over the country. Americans Prosperity has probably talked to more people between their phones and their doorsteps than any other organization or any other campaign in the country. I mean, we're north of 10 million voter contacts now over the last year and a half with our Bidenomics campaigns and our other ongoing efforts. And over and over again, we hear the same issues that the leader talked about: border security and inflation. They are just crushing American families, and they couldn't be more concerned about what's going on. And I think the message is exactly right. If Republicans can stay focused on these things, they are going to win. If the election becomes about Trump's character or the Dobbs and democracy fights that Democrats want to talk about that are simply not actually high priorities for the American people, but are places where Democrats can define the narrative, then I think it's a bigger question. But if we stay focused on the issues that matter, I think conservatives are going to be in for a good November.
Yeah, Angela, listen, you're in the business of communications and being able to deliver messages. Is there a concern here, as we've often, and listen, Trust me, there are plenty of people whose careers have been doomed by second guessing the way Donald Trump wins elections, because he's always second guessed, and he does pretty well for himself. But there's a concern that he's focusing on the issues that matter most to him versus the issues that matter most to voters. Or do we often see them harmonize?
They've harmonized a lot. They certainly did in 2016, where he was called the blue collar billionaire, helped propel him to the White House. But Akash touched on something really important, that so far this election has been virtually issueless. We're not talking about things like the economy, like the border, like education and healthcare that would normally be front page news because the political world has been so crazy. So it might have been an issueless election up until this point, but we're not leading issueless lives. As the congressman said in the clip that you played, everybody cares about the grocery bill, no matter who they are. Everybody sees prices rising. And if the GOP can hammer on the fact that Kamala Harris was there for all of it, she helped make this happen, that right there is a winning message.
Yeah, and I think throughout this program, actually, today, you're going to hear many people delivering that message. I got to take it back to Akash, though. You guys at AFP have invested a lot of money in the Bidenomics website. Are you getting KAMALAnomics now? Is that an option for you? Did you already secure it?
Another allied organization of ours actually did that. And as you know, Larry, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But I think that's a really important point, which is that every single vote was essential. Kamala Harris cast the tiebreaker. You know, President Biden's name is on Bidenomics. He signed these things into law. Kamala Harris was a tie-breaking vote on the big spending bills, but every single Democratic senator who voted for these bills was essential in getting them there, right? Bob Casey and John Tester and Sherrod Brown, every single one of them cast a deciding vote for these policies. So anyone who advocated for, helped craft, or voted for these big spending bills is to blame for the inflation crisis. That's a case that Republicans have got to make on the campaign trail, make them own the impacts that American families are feeling at the gas station or the grocery store every day.
Quickly back to you, Angela, because you can see what the Democrats are doing here. They want this election to be a personality election. They want it to be about who Kamala Harris is. Maybe that's why President Trump this week spent a lot of time questioning who Kamala Harris is. How do you do that as a communications expert? How do you pivot back and say, no, we don't want to talk about, you know, who this person is or what they represent. We want to talk about what they've done and how they've broken things.
Well, President Trump, if I had the president's ear, I would recommend to him that he stay laser focused on the things that are affecting everyday Americans. And that's not Kamala Harris's personality or how she speaks or how she identifies. It's none of those things. Now, the advantage that Kamala Harris has is a compliant legacy media. She hasn't really had to take questions. She has yet to face a difficult question. Nobody has asked her, do you sign off on the parts of the Biden administration that are hurting Americans in their wallets and in their lives and certainly in their schools? No one has asked her if she's going to do anything different than the same failed administration we have now. So if President Trump were to really hone in on that question until she is essentially forced to answer, to put her flag in the ground somewhere, I think the election and our political discourse is worse off for it because she hasn't had to account for what's gone wrong in this administration.
Yeah. And Elaine, ultimately, I want to bring it back to the down ticket races, too, as we've already touched on, because beyond who sits in the Oval Office, growing a majority in the House right now is an agenda for the Republicans, and the Democrats are very vulnerable in the Senate. It all plays into those down ticket races.
Absolutely. And those the House and the Senate are going to be faced with an expiring Tax Cuts and Jobs Act next year. And so that bill is that piece of legislation is on the ballot this November because the Biden-Harris, Harris-Biden, whatever you want to call it, administration has promised to let that bill expire and it will just sunset. They don't have to do anything about it. And the poll I just referenced that we came out with, a clear majority of small business owners said that bill helped their businesses, and more than 2/3 of them want to see it extended because they'll lose a 20% deduction, immediate expensing, all of those things that created a small business boom under the Trump administration will simply go away. And those are real issues. And Kamala Harris has been very clear on letting it expire. We are saying the same things we said a month ago about the economy, about the policies that are hurting people. Again, it does not matter who's at the top of the Democratic Party and the ticket because it's the same failed policies.
Well said. We'll leave it there, but we'll move on to similar themes of the day here. where it comes to this election and whether this is going to lead with policy versus personality on election day. Keep it right here.